The sun was slowly climbing over the vast, dusty plains, casting a golden light across the small frontier town. The air was dry and carried the faint smell of wood smoke and fresh hay from the ranches surrounding the town. James Harper, a young cowboy in his late 20s, rode into the settlement on his well-worn horse. His face was tanned from years in the sun, and his hands were strong and calloused from handling cattle and horses. James had earned a reputation among the settlers as a fair and dependable man. He was quiet, often keeping to himself, but when he spoke, people listened. He had a certain respect for Native Americans that not every settler shared, which had earned him trust among both groups. This particular morning, James rode to the trading post at the center of town. It was a busy place, where settlers came to buy supplies, and traders sold goods from far-off lands. There was always a hum of conversation, the clatter of horses' hooves, and the occasional shout from someone haggling over a price. But today, there was a different kind of tension in the air. James noticed a small crowd gathered near the back of the market, where a trader had set up a crude pen. Curious, he guided his horse closer to see what was happening. Inside the pen stood a young Apache woman. She was unlike anyone James had ever seen. Her hair was long and black, falling straight down her back, and her eyes were deep and expressive, carrying both strength and sadness. Even though she had been brought here under circumstances that were harsh and unfair, she held herself with dignity. She did not plead or cry, but instead watched the crowd quietly, her head held high. The whispers of the onlookers filled the air. Some admired her beauty. Others spoke in hushed tones about her bravery, for they said she had survived hardships that would have broken most people. James felt an unusual pull as he looked at her. Most men would have been captivated only by her appearance, but he noticed something deeper. There was intelligence in her eyes, a kind of quiet courage that spoke of resilience. He dismounted his horse and approached the trader, who was a gruff man with a sharp tongue and quick hands. James had dealt with traders before, and he knew they often took advantage of situations for profit. But he also knew how to negotiate, and he believed that fairness mattered, even in a place as rough as the frontier. "Who is she?" James asked, his voice calm but firm. The trader looked at him, sizing him up. "She's an Apache woman," he said. "Just came from the West. Strong, young, and smart. Worth every penny, I tell you." James frowned slightly. He didn't like the way the trader talked about her as if she were an object, something to be sold. But he pushed the thought aside. He had a purpose. He wasn't here for profit. He wanted to ensure that whoever came with him would be treated with respect, not cruelty. "How much?" James asked. The trader named a price that would have seemed high for most people in the settlement, but James didn't hesitate. He knew he could pay it. What mattered more to him was ensuring that the woman would be safe and treated fairly. He handed the trader the money, watching the man count it greedily before tossing the woman a look of indifference. The Apache woman did not speak, but she studied James carefully. Her eyes seemed to measure him, trying to understand what kind of man he was. James, in turn, understood that trust could not be demanded, it had to be earned. He offered her a small nod and a gentle smile, a silent promise that she would not be harmed in his care. She gave a faint, cautious nod in return, still wary but sensing that he was different from the others. James led her out of the pen and towards his horse. She hesitated for a moment, then followed. The town watched quietly as the two of them walked, some whispering with curiosity, others with suspicion. It was unusual, after all, for a man to treat a Native American woman with such care during those times. Most settlers either ignored them or treated them poorly. But James was not like most settlers. He had always believed in fairness and respect, no matter who someone was. On the ride back to his ranch, the woman stayed silent, her eyes scanning the landscape with a mix of caution and curiosity. James kept the conversation light at first, talking about the plains, the cattle, and the ranch work. He wanted her to see that life on his ranch was hard but fair, and that he had no intention of causing her harm. Slowly, her posture relaxed, and she began to answer his questions in short, careful sentences. Each word she spoke carried thought, intelligence, and a quiet strength that impressed James more and more. By the time they reached the ranch, the sun was high in the sky, casting long shadows across the open fields. The ranch itself was modest, but well kept. Horses grazed in the paddocks, cattle wandered lazily, and the wooden buildings showed signs of care and attention. James led her inside the main house, offering her a simple meal of bread, beans, and roasted meat. She accepted politely, her movements graceful and measured. James noticed how she observed everything, learning quickly, adapting to the new environment, without losing her sense of self. As the day wore on, James showed her around the ranch, explaining the work that needed to be done, introducing her to a few trusted ranch hands, and making sure she understood that she was free to ask questions or take her time to adjust. She watched quietly, absorbing every detail, and occasionally asked thoughtful questions that revealed her intelligence and curiosity. James admired her patience and her careful consideration of each step. By evening, the two of them were sitting near the fire outside the house. The sky was painted in shades of orange and pink as the sun set behind the distant hills. For the first time, the Apache woman spoke more freely, sharing small stories of her life before coming to the settlement. James listened without interruption, showing genuine interest and respect. He could see the spark of resilience in her eyes, the same spark that had drawn him to her earlier in the day. Though their meeting had begun under unusual circumstances, a sense of connection had started to form. James understood that the trust between them would take time to grow, but he was willing to be patient. He had never met anyone like her before, someone so strong, intelligent, and dignified, despite the hardships she had endured. And she, in turn, seemed to sense that he was different from the others, someone who valued fairness and honesty above all else. As night fell, the ranch became quiet, with only the soft sounds of animals settling in for the night and the distant howl of a coyote. James felt a sense of calm, knowing that he had made the right choice in bringing her to his home safely. The Apache woman, too, felt a cautious sense of relief. She was far from her old life, but for the first time in a long while, she felt a small measure of safety and respect. By the end of the first day, there was no need for grand gestures or words. The unspoken understanding between them was enough. James had fulfilled his promise of safety and fairness, and she had begun to see that not all encounters on the frontier were harsh or cruel. The foundation of trust had been laid, a foundation that would grow stronger with each passing day. The night sky stretched endlessly above the plains, filled with stars that seemed brighter than anywhere else. James and the Apache woman sat quietly, listening to the gentle rustle of the wind through the trees. Both of them were aware that tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, and new moments that could shape their lives forever. But for now, they simply existed in this moment, a moment of quiet understanding, respect, and the beginning of something that neither of them could yet fully imagine. And so, the first day ended not with dramatic events or conflicts, but with the subtle, powerful beginning of a bond built on dignity, trust, and mutual recognition. It was a start that promised more than just survival. It promised the possibility of connection, partnership, and perhaps, in time, friendship, or even something deeper. The next morning, the sun rose over the plains with a soft, warm glow, casting long shadows across the ranch. The air was crisp, carrying the fresh scent of dew on the grass. James Harper woke early, as was his habit, and went outside to tend to the horses. The Apache woman, now beginning to feel more comfortable in her surroundings, quietly stepped out to watch him work. She had spent the night reflecting on the events of the previous day, And although much was still unfamiliar and uncertain, a small sense of trust had begun to grow in her heart. James noticed her standing there, observing him with careful eyes. He smiled gently and waved her over. "Come help me with the horses," he said in his calm, patient voice. She hesitated at first, then approached. Her movements were graceful, careful, and full of attention. James handed her a brush and showed her how to clean the horses' coats, how to check for cuts and sores, and how to speak softly to them so they would remain calm. She listened and followed his instructions closely, demonstrating quick learning and surprising skill. As they worked together, there was a quiet rhythm to their actions. The air was filled with the soft brushing of the horses' coats and the occasional neigh. James kept the conversation light, asking simple questions about her life, her journey, and her skills. She answered slowly at first, cautious in her words, but gradually she began to share more. Her voice was soft but firm, carrying the wisdom of someone who had faced many challenges and survived. James listened carefully, never interrupting, showing that he valued her thoughts and experiences. By midday, the work with the horses was done, and James suggested they take a short break under the shade of a large oak tree near the ranch house. He offered her some bread and water, and she accepted politely. As they sat together, James decided to speak about something that had been on his mind since the day before. "I know this is sudden," he began carefully, "and I don't want you to feel forced in any way. But I want to ask you something important. Would you consider being my wife?" The Apache woman froze for a moment, her eyes widening slightly. She had not expected such a question so soon, yet there was something in James's voice, gentle, honest, and respectful, that made her pause and think rather than fear. She looked around at the vast plains, at the ranch that represented safety and stability, and at the man who had treated her with kindness and fairness. After a few moments of thought, she spoke quietly. "If I agree, it must be because I trust you, not because I am told to," she said. James nodded solemnly. "I promise nothing will be taken from you, and you will have the freedom to make your own choices. I only ask that we respect each other and work together." There was a long silence as she considered his words. Finally, she nodded, a small but firm gesture that spoke volumes. "Then we will be partners," she said, using the word carefully, meaning more than just marriage. It was a union of respect, trust, and shared life. From that moment, their relationship took on a new meaning. It was no longer just about survival or circumstance. It was about partnership. James and the Apache woman began the formal process of marriage, which in the settlement was simple but meaningful. They exchanged promises, each aware of the significance of the bond they were forming. It was a union not only recognized by the law of the settlers, but also one that held the quiet blessing of understanding and trust between two people from different worlds. The community watched with curiosity. Some settlers whispered about the unusual pairing, unsure how to react. Many had never seen such respect between a settler and a Native American woman. Within the Apache community, word traveled slowly, and some were cautious, uncertain whether this union would honor their traditions. But both James and his wife understood that they could only move forward with patience and respect, building trust step by step with those around them. Life on the ranch became a series of shared experiences. James showed her how to manage the cattle, mend fences, and care for the horses. She, in turn, taught him skills he had never known: the subtle ways to track animals, the wisdom of reading the weather in the sky, and knowledge of plants and herbs that could heal minor injuries. Each day, their mutual respect grew stronger. They laughed together at small mistakes and celebrated accomplishments quietly but fully. One afternoon, a storm swept across the plains, sending gusts of wind and sheets of rain over the ranch. James and his wife worked side by side to secure the animals and protect the crops. Despite the chaos, there was a sense of unity between them. She handled the horses calmly, while he managed the cattle. They communicated with simple gestures and short, clear words, showing that their partnership was not just in words, but in action. That storm, though frightening, became a symbol of how they could face challenges together. Over the following weeks, the bond between them deepened. They shared meals, worked the land, and spent evenings by the fire, telling stories of their pasts. James learned about her life as an Apache woman, the hardships, the traditions, and the family she had left behind. She learned about his childhood on the frontier, the struggles of life as a cowboy, and the values he held dear. Each story, each shared memory, built layers of understanding and trust. One evening, as the sun set over the horizon, casting a golden glow across the plains, James and his wife sat quietly, watching the sky change colors. The land was peaceful, and for the first time, she felt a sense of belonging. She realized that she had not only found safety, but a true companion in James. And he realized that he had found someone whose strength, intelligence, and courage complemented his own, making their life together richer and more meaningful than he could have imagined. In the months that followed, their life together became a balance of work, learning, and companionship. Neighbors slowly came to respect their union, seeing the genuine partnership between them. The Apache woman earned admiration for her skill, resilience, and willingness to engage with the community while maintaining her dignity and heritage. James was admired not only for his bravery and fairness, but also for the respect he showed to someone from a different culture. Their marriage, though unusual to some, became a quiet story of hope and understanding on the frontier. It showed that trust, patience, and respect could create bonds that transcended cultural boundaries. They were no longer simply a man and a woman living together. They were partners, equals, and friends who shared the responsibilities and joys of life on the frontier. As the seasons changed, their relationship grew stronger. They faced hardships, the harsh winters, the unpredictable weather, and the challenges of running a ranch, but always together. Each difficulty became an opportunity to rely on one another, to learn, and to strengthen the partnership they had forged. By the time the next year rolled around, their marriage was not only accepted by the community but quietly admired, a testament to the power of trust and respect. Looking back, James and his wife could see how far they had come. What began as a chance encounter in a marketplace had turned into a life of shared purpose and deep connection. They had taken what could have been a story of hardship and turned it into one of hope, understanding, and partnership. Their story became known among the settlers and whispered among travelers. A tale of courage, fairness, and the unexpected ways life could bring people together. In the quiet of the evening, as they sat together by the fire once more, there was no need for words to describe what they had. Their eyes met, and in that simple glance, they understood the bond they had created. It was a bond built not on wealth, convenience, or circumstance, but on respect, patience, and the courage to trust one another. And in the vast, wild plains of the frontier, that bond was more valuable than anything else in the world. And so, what had begun as a single day, with a purchase that could have been ordinary, became a story of partnership, love, and respect, a story that would be remembered on the frontier for years to come. James Harper and the Apache woman had found in each other not only a companion, but a shared life that honored their strengths, their wisdom, and their humanity. And together, they faced the future, side by side, ready for whatever the wide, wild plains might bring.